Hello, and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and I'm thrilled you're joining us today for an episode that's guaranteed to forge a stronger appreciation for the incredible world of manufacturing. Before we dive into today's fiery conversation, remember to check us out at our website at manufacturingculturepodcast.com. You can also find us heating things up on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram for more sizzling content and behind the scenes looks. Today, we've got two guests who are no strangers to heat. First up, Jerrod Weaver, the Executive Director of the Non-Ferrous Foundry Society. Jerrod brings over 25 years of smoldering experience in association management. He's a man who knows his metals, with a BS in manufacturing engineering and a specialty in cast metals from Western Michigan University. Go Broncos. Not only is he a certified powerhouse in the association world, but Jerrod is also a maestro in the kitchen and a champion fisherman in his leisure time. When he's not stoking the fires of industry, you might find him cooking up a storm or reeling in the big one. Joining Jerrod, we've got Matt Gilmore, the Director of Business Development for the NFFS. With over a decade of experience in the blazing fields of manufacturing trade association management, Matt has honed his skills in membership development, event creation, and even the founding of new manufacturing associations. A wordsmith with a BA in English from Wittenberg University and a certified expert in public relations, Matt is just as passionate about crafting compelling narratives as he is about forging stronger communities in the manufacturing industry. Outside the office, Matt's personal life is just as dynamic, dedicated to traveling with his fiancée Heidi and coaching his sons, Jackson and Liam, to soccer greatness. Today's episode promises to be an incandescent journey through the world of casting, exploring the impact of non-ferrous metals on our everyday lives and the manufacturing industry at large. So stoke the fires of your curiosity as we dive into a conversation that's sure to spark inspiration, laughter, and a deeper understanding of the art and science of foundries. Buckle up, listeners, for an episode that molds the future of manufacturing right before your ears. Hello, Jerrod. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you guys doing today?
We're great.
Jim, we're doing great. And just before we get started, that's a heck of an introduction. Way to work in so many hot metal terms into an introduction. You should do that for a living.
If I could find somebody, Jerrod, that would pay me to do this, I would love to. This is one of my favorite parts about hosting this podcast is writing these intros. So yes, if you know somebody who's willing to pay me for this, I'm your guy. How you doing, Matt Gilmore?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you. James and I have known each other for a while. I knew him back when he was James Mayer. So I'm probably going to mess this up and call you James the rest of the time.
Man, I get called everything from James to Jim to Cancun Jimmy. It doesn't really matter. And for those of you listeners not familiar with the Cancun Jimmy story, reach out. I'll be happy to share it with you. I'm not going to do that on an episode, though. So, yes, Matt, we've known each other for quite some time. You were my esteemed leader at one point. You actually introduced me to Jerrod when we worked together at the NTMA. So I've known these two gentlemen for quite some time. You guys have really impressive histories. I'm going to start with you, Jerrod. Can you tell me your story? How did you get to where you are today?
You know, like many in manufacturing, it's a long and complicated process to end up where you end up. Like many in our industry, I started off just with a love and a passion of making things. And to that point, I started working in a model and pattern shop as part of my activities to work my way through college. More than that, I was a bit of a troublemaker in high school. And back in the day, we used to have things called vocational classes. Yeah. And so about ninth grade, I'm in a vocational class, took a machine shop, loved cutting metal, loved being a machinist. That's how I got hooked up with the model and pattern shop, started off building patterns for foundries. I didn't know what a foundry was, but I liked the tooling.
Awesome.
Took a tour through foundries, and you'll hear this from other foundry guys. When you see your first metal being poured, it's literally a river of fire, and it just some people, it just captures your imagination, it captures your heart. And from there was no doubt that I was a maker and I was going to be in the foundry industry in some capacity. Always saw myself as a hands-on guy. But here we are in a trade association, and it's a fantastic opportunity to work with lots of like-minded people to make things that this country really needs. So that's my backstory.
Awesome. I love it. Matt, what about you? How'd you get to where you are?
Well, it's been a winding road, James. I started my career in nonprofit, public relations, marketing, government affairs. My family history. My dad actually owned a printed circuit manufacturing shop, so I know the small manufacturing business really well. That's what I grew up with, right? So when I wanted to transition out of that nonprofit life into something else, I have a really strong background in working with associations back then. So I looked for a manufacturing. Can I do this in the manufacturing world as well? So that's where I kind of dove into the NTMA experience. That was my introduction to machining, that side of the manufacturing world, which I've spent most of the last 10 years before joining NFFS here just at the beginning of this year. And what I learned, James, through that, whether it be a machine shop or whether it be a foundry, these are people similar to my dad. These are all small to medium size, mostly family businesses, a lot of them second, third generation family businesses that are, keeping this country running, keeping the world running, making parts and castings and things that go into everything we need on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just to clarify before we go too far into the episode, is it NFFS or is it NFFS?
We use the term NFFS. It's awfully hard to pronounce a 4-letter word with no vowels, so that's the best we could come up with.
All right. I like it. I just don't want to mess up and keep saying NFFS if it's NFFS, right? So, all right, NFFS it is. So, guys, either one of you, give us an overview of what the Non-Ferrous Foundry Society is. What's its history? What's its mission? How are you guys impacting the manufacturing landscape?
Great. To start off with, we're a trade association. There's lots of them out there covering almost every industry and every processing task in the economy. We specifically represent non-ferrous foundries. Presuming most of your listeners understand foundries, it's basically a heavy-duty manufacturing environment where we melt metal down to a molten state. We pour it into a mold and let it solidify, take it out of the mold, and you end up with a complex geometry. That's called a metal casting. Right? So that's what foundries do, is they cast metals.
Yep.
We happen to serve the non-ferrous side of the industry. If you remember your high school chemistry class, ferrous is Latin for iron. So anything that's a non-ferrous material is going to not be primarily based in iron. The most common non-ferrous materials are going to be aluminum, brass and bronze, non-metallic, non-sparking kind of stuff. We're not iron and steel guys. They pour rusty metal castings. Right. So what we like to say on our side of the industry is we don't like rusty metal casting, so we cast good stuff that doesn't rust.
There you go. Is there a contentiousness between NFFS and your counterpart on that ferrous side?
No.
There's no clan warfare or anything like that exists?
No, in our industry, at least on the foundry side, we're pretty well siloed. We have the Die Casting Association. We have the Steel Foundry Society that handles the steel guys. We've got the Ductile Iron Research Association. We got the American Foundry Society, who kind of covers everything. So though there's a lot of associations, we tend to be very focused and very siloed. It just helps us to be more effective to help those small and mid-sized manufacturers like Matt was mentioning earlier.
Okay. And so what's the mission of NFFS?
Well, the mission statement is to advance the manufacturing, recycling, and use of non-ferrous castings, right? That's kind of the global level of what we do as an association. But bringing it down to just the ground level, we're here to make foundries successful and make them better foundries, right? So to the point, we bring a lot of resources, a lot of skills. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But at the end of the day, we're here as advocates and representatives for our industry and to help provide the resources and tools to help our members do what they do, but do it better.
Cool. Matt, who are the members of NFFS? And how does the society support them? I mean, for those listeners who may not be familiar with a trade association, right, in this industry, how do trade associations support their members, and what are some key benefits?
Yeah, James, great question. The role of as I see the role of a trade association, we're a solutions platform. We're here to connect the industry to do the best things to make them successful, to
Yeah.
raise their profits, to make them as sustainable as possible. And we're supporting the great majority of our members are foundries, our small to mid-sized foundries throughout the U.S., focused mostly in the Midwest, which is the industrial
Mm-hmm.
sector of the country, obviously. But as to Jerrod's point earlier, we're here to support them as best we can to make them as successful as possible. So we
Yeah.
provide them multiple resources. We provide them networking opportunities, which is really, I think, the key to most trade associations. You give them you give members opportunities to meet each other, to learn from each
Yeah.
other, to grow with each other, right? So we're putting them, we're bringing them together. We just had our industry executive conference very successfully last week in the Florida Keys. It was great turnout, great opportunity for people to network with each other, to learn some things from some great industry speakers, and most importantly, just to spend time together, right? Because
Yeah.
you just learn what's working for someone might work well for someone else. What's my challenge? I have a solution that worked here. It might work for you.
Yeah.
So that level of network is really, kind of the best thing that trade associations bring to folks. But we also bring, weekly industry news through e-newsletters, the most important things we think cultivated coming from the industry directly into people's inboxes. We do some advocacy work in DC. Jerrod's very involved in that in the industry. Some technical training, safety training, things like that are very important to our members. Icon, which is something I know we'll get into later, which is very
Yeah.
important to me, is a business development tool that NFFS is developed. It's a portal to the Department of Defense for contracting with them. And then we have some programs with strategic partners. We provide solutions in shipping, supplies, and energy for our members, and those
Got it.
options are growing as well. So
Yeah.
we're just trying to bring solutions to folks to make their members sleep better at night, knowing that some of the stuff NFFS can help you with and will support you through.
Yeah. Awesome. How many members are there currently?
So there's
Jerrod, do you want
about
to take this?
125, 130 manufacturing foundries are part of our organization. We have another 30 plus industry suppliers
Wow.
that are also part of this organization. They're not large numbers, but the population of non-ferrous foundries in the country isn't very large, and it continues to contract. Just to give you a reference, when I started in this industry back in 1996, there were about 2,300 foundries, give or take, 45 to 50% were non-ferrous. The rest are going to be iron and steel.
Wow.
And since that time, we've seen about a 30% contraction in the overall number of foundries in the country. There's about 1,600, 1,650 in the country at present time. So that's about a 30% contraction in about 25 years. And we still see an ongoing wave of consolidation and mergers. So while the numbers aren't very large, I feel we represent a pretty representative and large segment of the non-ferrous foundry industry. And so that's great for us. We're happy to do that.
To me, Jerrod, that's a massive number because I didn't even know there were that many foundries, non-ferrous foundries, right? So to me, that was a shocking number that there are that many, at least, if not more, that aren't members, right? So I applaud you guys. That's wonderful.
And Jim, this is you and I have been involved with other manufacturing trade associations over the years. This is a really tight knit group.
Sure.
These folks really like to get together. They like to learn from each other. It's not you sign up for NFFS and then you just read the newsletter and you go away. This is a group
Right.
that likes to be engaged. They like to maximize their memberships, get together, do those sorts of things.
That's great. So how long has NFFS been around?
Well, we're about an 80-year-old organization. We were actually formed back in August of 1945, and it's kind of an interesting story. August 1945, World War II is decidedly in full swing.
Yeah.
And so we had material shortages and we had rationing in the country. And so the non-ferrous foundries, particularly copper-based foundries, were having problems getting allocations of elemental copper from the War Resource Allocation Board. And so a group of like-minded gentlemen got together, formed what eventually became the Non-Ferrous Foundry Society as a platform to lobby for material allocations to keep our nation's foundries running during that critical time.
Wow. What are some other key milestones that you guys have seen in that 80? I mean, that's an impressive amount of time to have been around. What are some key milestones that you guys have hit along the way?
You know, milestones are kind of interesting. It's going to come back and maybe expand a little bit on what Matt had said about part of our purpose. Part of our purpose is also to be a representative for foundries and for manufacturers in general, right? So to point any one particular foundry may not be all that effective in moving the needle on new or proposed regulations. But as a community, a band of brothers, which is
Yeah.
what we are, we're able to have strength in numbers and help, advance the interest of all of the industry, not just our members. And oftentimes that leads to improvements for manufacturing industry wide. So we really take that leadership role seriously on behalf of our members. And so to that point, we've had a lot of success over the years in trying to keep OSHA and EPA regulations at a reasonable basis, right? We're all pro safety. Foundries are incredibly safe work environments, contrary to belief. But sometimes regulators can overreach, as we all know. So that's part of our job, is to bring truth to power and make sure that the regulations that they're trying to pass or that they're trying to approve are both economically and technologically feasible without putting a large segment of our small family-owned businesses out of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, let's touch on safety a little bit. These are places where there's, as you said earlier, hot metal rivers, right? I mean, these are hot
Mm-hmm.
places that may not have the best perception from the public on how safe they are. How do you guys play a role in supporting safe foundries, and what are some of the workforce challenges that come uh, on the safety side of from the foundries?
I would start off by saying that in the past, the foundry industry has gotten a historically bad rap, right? We're seen as an old school industry, very blue collar. You often see pictures of dusty smokestacks emitting lots of clouds into the sky, and they're like, oh, that's foundries. And it can't be further from the truth, right? Where we're at today is foundries. Yes, we deal with molten and hot metals, but it's incredibly safe because we comply with all the OSHA regulations and we bring proactive strategies to foundries to help them be more profitable and at the same time provide those safe work environments. So,
Yeah,
for example, right, our Non-Ferrous Foundry Society, we've partnered with OSHA since 1996. We've received 7 or 8 different grants totaling more than $500,000 to develop educational and training materials to help foundries comply with a whole host of regulations. For example, foundry occupational noise exposure, lead exposure programs, air
wow.
sampling in the foundry, hazard communication, emergency preparedness. So we have a host of resources that we develop both natively and in cooperation with the agencies to help guide foundries in their quest to be better employers and to be a safe work environment.
Wow, I just heard a lobbyist speak a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the new proposed heat stress regulations from OSHA. How
Mhm.
does that something like that play a part in the foundry world that is super hot already, right, on the inside?
Right. I believe you're talking about the OSHA proposed rule on indoor and outdoor work environments and heat exposure.
Yeah,
Obviously, as a thermal processing industry, we're deeply concerned with that regulation and what it's going to require.
yeah,
To point, we've seen some advance notice and some information gathering from the agency, and so in our role as a society, we try to provide information to the agency that represents what our current practices are and what impact the proposed regulation could have on us. And
yeah,
it's kind of scary, honestly, when they talk about managing thermal stress on employees. It sounds good, but some of their approaches, I think, leave less to be desired, right? Most of the regulators these days, um, don't know manufacturing. They've never worked in a manufacturing plant. Back when OSHA was launched in 1976, most of the agency people that staffed those inspector positions and the leadership had experience in the manufacturing industry. But what we see now is not the same agency, right? They're inspectors that are oftentimes confused about what manufacturing is. They're intimidated by the guys working in the shop floor. And more often than not, they end up, doing paperwork audits in the front office. Maybe they take a couple of pictures to take back and show somebody else to see if they know what they're looking at. So it's a decidedly different culture.
Yeah. So let's talk about culture, right? These are small to medium-sized family businesses, and so let's talk about that culture within. I mean, I would imagine that the culture within is similar to that of a machine shop or other skilled trades organizations, right? Talk about what the culture's like in a lot of these places.
Great. I'd be happy to just touch on that. When people get together and work towards a common goal, you develop a bond, right? Think of guys in the Army and in the platoon. They come back and their best buddies are buddies they served in the war with. Yeah. I've found it to be true in the manufacturing environment as well. Whether you're a frontline production guy, you're a molder, you're a metal pourer, you're a grinder, there's a camaraderie and a brotherhood in arms from working in a same environment.
Sure.
Right. And so that's part of the culture, I think, is those frontline guys just tend to be incredibly tight. And I think what's interesting about the non-ferrous side of the industry, right, is even though many of our members are all competitors, they're also brothers in arms, like I said. And so they work collectively to support one another, even though they're competitors, for the common good, for their own business success, and to raise the profile of the industry. So while there's a lot of competition, there's a lot more partnership and brotherhood than one would think.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's common in other industries, but it's pretty impressive to see on our side.
And Matt, you worked with machine companies, right? Machine shops at your previous organizations that you were with. You're now working with these foundries. Talk to us about some of the similarities or differences that you've seen in the types of organizations that you've worked with over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and James, what I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more similarities than differences, right? These are similar structured organizations to what we see on the machining side. These small and medium-sized family businesses that kind of push the economy and push the country forward. One thing that I think is kind of in alignment with what we see on the machining side is the workforce development challenges, right? Finding people that want to work in this environment. And there's, to Jerrod's point, a misconception on what a foundry is like, same as machining. It's not dirty, dark, and dangerous, right? These are places, well, on the machining side, you might be able to eat off the floor. Maybe not on the foundry side, but they're technologically advanced organizations. The technology is moving forward. They're focused on safety. They're focused on creating work environments that are sustainable, that you can have a job, you can advance through a career, you can raise a family. This is kind of the message for manufacturing that we've been trying to get out for decades here now. This is not 1940 anymore. The foundry, the image of a foundry needs to, kind of be, realized similar to, the modern machine shop, which is in most cases, not all cases, James. I know we've been in some of these places that haven't been wonderful. I've skated across a few machine shops in my day, right?
Absolutely.
But most of these organizations they're focused on the right things. They want to do it the right way. They want to grow their business. They want to take care of their people, and they want to create opportunities for not just jobs, but careers for people and sustainability moving forward. And some of these companies are in their third or fourth generation. I mean, they've been doing it right for a while, right? So sustainability is important.
So does the foundry industry have the same problem finding people that the manufacturing, the making of things side of manufacturing has? Is there that skilled labor shortage? And how do people then get interested? I mean, with young people, machine shops can go in and talk about, hey, this is how you make something new, right? This is how you can become a machinist or a welder. How do you get young people interested in being part of a foundry?
Boy, if we could come up with that answer, we'd really be doing something, Jim. Like all manufacturing industries, right? We're struggling with demographics, and they're a very real thing. We have an ongoing wave of retirements, and for those of you familiar in the manufacturing industry, we're predominantly populated with people that have 20 or 30-year careers, or probably getting near the end of their career path, and we just don't have enough young people in general, and specifically interested in manufacturing, to replace those losses. So to point, we're working hard to identify new students. We're finding that by the time they're in college, it's already too late to be talking to them. We're trying to figure out ways to become hyper local. I mean, all hiring issues are extremely local anyway, right? Yeah. So we're trying to figure out a way to help our members and help our industry communicate even down the chain a little bit back into high school or possibly even middle school, and just show them what a cool and vibrant industry that manufacturing is. I mean, let's face it, we spent 30 years telling our youth that you want to do anything in the world but go to work in the plant, right? You want to be a doctor, you want to be a dentist, you want to cut lawns, whatever you do, you don't want to go to the plant. Right. And I think that that's a bad message. It's a horrible message, and we've just propagated it for too long. The truth is, manufacturing is the only industry that creates wealth in this country. Everybody else moves it around, shuffles it, reorganizes it, calls it something else. Manufacturers take raw materials and create products that are worthwhile, that are in demand, that people pay money for. Yep. Right? And it's a fantastic, vibrant industry. And I think we need to tell kids that. Tell them it's okay to be interested in making things. Tell them it's okay to have a curiosity about how we take ore out of the ground and end up with, a whatever. That's a fascinating story, and we just have to get that messaging right. Beyond that, I mentioned demographics. We know those are real. We know that we don't have the youth and the workforce coming in to replace those losses. So like many other industries, we have to look at automation. We know automation has got to be part of that strategy looking forward. Like everybody else, we're all struggling to get our hands around the best way to automate things and do it in a cost affordable basis. I mean, back right after COVID happened and we had everybody silently quitting, articulating arm robots doubled in price. Lead time shot up to 24 months. Man, that's hard to plan an automation effort when you just are paying through the teeth and waiting extremely long lead times. So it's a real problem. If we can figure it out, we'll be doing something. But, to point, that's kind of what the trade association's here for. Yeah. In response to that perceived lack of available staff, we created something called our Foundry Automation and Integration and Robotics Working Group, the FAIR Working Group. And all this body is a community of like-minded guys who know that they need to approach automation. We've got some guys who are very advanced and skilled in integrating automation into their operations. And then we got a larger population that just are trying to skill up and figure out how to even approach the topic. I don't have to tell you that automators and integrators and builders are in high demand right now. And so it's a tough environment.
Yeah. And so one of the things that does exist in the manufacturing world is that automation culture paradox, right? Where a lot of companies, especially on that small to medium size, are just not culturally ready for automation. It's not that they couldn't use it. They 100% could use it, but culturally, they're not ready for it. A lot of that has to do with the demographics that you were talking about, right? As younger generations come into the trade, we're seeing more adoption in various verticals within manufacturing of automation, right? What can foundries do and other manufacturers that you guys have experience with to kind of embrace that automation in a faster and build their culture around it?
I'll just add another comment about that here is, I don't think foundries are innately adverse to automating their processes. I think what we need to realize is that many foundries are small lot batch manufacturers, right? They're not running 10,000 pieces at a time. They're running 10 molds, 50 molds, 100 molds, some of the more production-oriented foundries might have automated molders and they're running hundreds of molds,
Yeah.
right? But it's hard to take an environment where I'm going to make 5 molds of something and completely automate that process. So most of our effort to date has not been the in process, it's been the secondary processing. How do you automate removal of your sprues and your gating and your risers, right? How do we finish casting or rough grind a casting so that we send it to the machine shop and we're not creating too much work for those folks. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And for any of the younger listeners, right, we talked about there are some students out there who listen to this. If they say, wow, they've sold me on working for a foundry, what is that step for them to get into a career in the foundries? Is it similar to that of machining, right? Do they go through trade school for machining, or what's that process, that pathway?
We have a foundry education foundation that helps provide scholarship opportunities on behalf of a lot of different organizations and associations within the industry to try and attract engineering students. And it's
Okay.
had some pretty good success. Unfortunately, they typically end up in some of the larger manufacturing firms that can afford a little bit higher starting salary for those just coming out of college. And so the big guys tend to suck up most of the oxygen in the room.
Sure.
Where we end up on the smaller end of the bell curve, if you will, is guys that just have a passion for making things, and women, right? We're seeing a ongoing increase in the number of women working in this industry, and I think that's very exciting. Ultimately, it comes down to people who love to make things. They're inquisitive. They have a little bit of technical ability, right? Maybe you're going to take the guy who's changing the oil in your car. He knows how to use tools. He's got some interest in mechanical aptitude. Those are the kind of guys that maybe we're going to take a look at and see if we can convince them to come work for us.
Yeah. Awesome.
And James, real quick to that point, if anyone listening is interested in learning more or seeing a foundry in action, please reach out to us. We can coordinate all those sorts of interactions, tours, things like that. We're here to help the industry. We're here to get young folks involved. So we certainly can handle that on the NIF side.
Awesome. I want to come tour. So I don't know if there are any foundries in Arizona. I know there are a lot of mines that pull things like copper out here in Arizona. I don't know if there are any foundries though. So next time I make it further east, I'd love for you guys to take me on a tour of one of your foundries.
There's absolutely foundries in Arizona, and anywhere you want to go. You get a hold of us, Jim, and we'll make it happen. Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get one going. I'll take a little video as I walk through, as long as my phone doesn't melt, and we're good to go.
Don't throw in the fire, James. You'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Good.
James, if I can just add one more thing here. We're talking about talent and trying to draw young people into the industry, right? And this is feeding back into our comments about this isn't 1950 and this isn't your grandfather's foundry industry anymore. I think one of the big misconceptions about foundries is we're still that old school industry, and it can't be further from the truth. The truth is foundries are filled with tons of advanced manufacturing.
Awesome.
Right? We're talking about computer simulation modeling, thermal dynamics. We're talking about real-time visual inspection and X-ray, non-destructive testing systems.
Yeah.
It's just filled with advanced technology. Even though it's an old school industry, it's got a modern touch to it. And I think the other thing for the youngsters,
go ahead,
is that this industry is absolutely all about sustainability and green and recycling, right? And that seems counterproductive or counterintuitive for a manufacturing industry. But the fact is, foundries have been recycling metal and scrap for decades, for hundreds of years. And we were recycling before recycling was cool. So if young kids really have an interest in the environment and sustainability, there's no better place than to work in the foundry industry.
I love that. I love that. And that's got to be a huge selling point for some of those younger people, right? If you go to a trade school and you're talking about potential career paths for them, and you find somebody who does want to give back and have something that's a little bit more environmentally sustainable, this is a great career path for them.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Matt, I want to touch base. Matt, I want to switch gears and touch on Icon. You're new to the organization somewhat. You're director of business development. There's this massive tool that can help foundries with business development. Tell us about Icon and how is it benefiting your members?
Yeah, thanks, James. Icon it's a portal, it's a platform, it's a business development platform for members, and at this point, non-members as well. We're trying to grow the whole industry, and
Okay.
it's a gateway to opportunities with the Department of Defense. Um, some of our military equipment obviously is not brand new. You can't go out and buy a new tank every day, so you have to keep it running, right? And they have to
Yeah.
find ways to replace parts in these
Yeah.
operating platforms. So NIFS has a unique gateway to this industry, to the Department of Defense, through the Icon portal. It's very easy to use. It's through the website. You just go to nifs.org/icon. Really quick registration process, get you through, get you familiarized with the platform. We see it's a two-way win, I guess, right? It's an opportunity for business development for our members and others in the casting industry and machine shops as well, James, because there's opportunities
Interesting.
there. The castings need to be machined afterwards. Um, it's a great way to bring in new business. It's also a
Yeah.
way to support the American warfighter, right? This is something that's very important, near and dear to us, God and country. It's important to the association. We feel it's important to the, as a foundation or as a society based in the U.S. We're here to support the American military. So very simple process. You go through, you go into Icon, you create an account, you enter your supplier capabilities. This is what you specialize in. Let us know what you do in your foundry or in your machine shop. You can set up these bid match settings so that on a daily basis, you will receive an email straight, at home or the office, wherever you may be located, with something that would be potentially a good opportunity for your foundry or your machine shop, as a way to support the military and as a new business opportunity, right? So
That's massive.
very easy to use. We're trying to grow this as a tool that will support the U.S. military and support our industry. So we definitely would encourage any of your listeners, either on the machining side, which we know probably is the bulk of your group, but also on the foundry side, which is kind of the basis of how this got started. Jerrod's been working with Icon for 5-6 years now. We're very excited. It might move in some new directions here shortly, opening up to other industries as well. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves on that, but we have hopefully some exciting things on the horizon too. And we feel it'll be something that is beneficial to our members, the industry as a whole, and the military for years to come.
That's amazing. It's brilliant. And so it's a gateway to opportunities with the DoD and the DLA, right? Is that correct?
That's really the platform to go through to get the DLA is the Defense Logistics Agency. That's who we're working with to get through to these opportunities, to connect our members, the greater foundry community with the Department of Defense opportunities. There's a lot more alphabet soup in there too that we probably shouldn't share with your listeners because it's going to get lost. But the connectivity is the biggest part of it, James, is the opportunity, the ease of use to get these opportunities straight to your inbox. You can also, just go online and view through the portal what's out there, and hopefully use it as something that is beneficial to your foundry and the country as a whole.
That's great. And we've talked a couple of times with different guests on here about how young people, instead of going to university, right? If you're willing to put $100,000 down on a college degree, why don't you go and get a $50,000 machine, rewire your parents' garage with three-phase power, and put a CNC machine? Sounds like they could, if they do something like that, they now have the opportunity to go right into your into Icon and potentially start bidding on jobs and have that capacity right away, and they can do it from the ease of their home.
Yeah, that's a great
Jim, I mean,
idea.
that's where we're coming from. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
That's a great idea, James. I'm going to go upstairs. Jackson just got home. I'm going to tell him to go buy the machine, and we'll put it in the garage.
There you go,
Jerrod,
man.
you had a point.
I love it.
Yeah, just when we talk about the ICON program, just a couple of comments. One, yes, it's a software program, right? But why does it drive value? How does it drive value? Well, the first thing it does is it's able to source through the 50,000 different sales solicitations issued by DLA every day to identify the ones that have a confirmed metal casting in them, right? And then we take that solicitation, we match it up to your foundry's material and process capabilities. You could be an aluminum green sand foundry. You could be a copper-based investment foundry. We even talk iron and steel because the government does use some of that rusty stuff, right? So we match up manufacturing capabilities with open orders, and then we deliver them, as Matt said, via email every day. The strategy here is what we've done is replace the sales engineer on your workforce with automation and AI technologies to automatically source the opportunities that are exactly right for your plant. If it's too big for your molding flask, I don't have any interest in seeing it because I can't make it, right? And that's really the beauty of the system is if it gets delivered to your inbox, you're going to be able to make it. Just as evidence of the success of this program, we've contracted, not, potential sales. These are real contract award to ICON users, more than $360 million since 2018. These are real dollars being awarded to small manufacturers in support of our country's defense and military customers. It's been so effective, in fact, that we actually received an award from the Department of Defense in 2020. You can see it over my shoulder here. Yep. It's called the Defense Manufacturing Technology Achievement Award. It was presented to the ICON program by DoD as the best new supply chain development tool in 2020. Following up on the president's executive order about castings and forgings as being a critical defense industry, it's all just dovetailed. So it's a business development tool, but it also provides our military customers with the parts they need to put their tanks, their aircraft, their other platforms back into service.
Yeah. Well, and they need partners on the DoD side that are as committed to that zero mission failures as they are, right? Because every time they get a component part, whether it's a casting or a part from a machine shop, it's going into something that potentially can cost lives or save lives depending on its intended purpose, right? So there's got to be really zero failures with those products as they come out of those kinds of shops.
Well, foundries always aim for zero defects, right? But I would also mention that this isn't just a it isn't just a casting platform. Matt had alluded that we're looking at adding other industries such as forging in the near future, but we already have a working relationship with the NTMA and its membership. This is absolutely designed for those small and medium-sized machine shops that are interested in machining the castings that are manufactured by our members and in turn selling those off to DLA. So if you're a manufacturer, a machine shop, this has absolutely got tons of potential for you, and we're going to show you the supply chain on where to get the castings that you need. The other interesting aspect is, as we mentioned up front, you have to have a tool in a foundry to create that geometry, right? Think of a pattern. We're going to pack sand around it, pull the tool out. We're going to close the mold up. We end up with a hollow cavity where we pour a mold into to pull our metal casting out of a specific geometry. That tooling is all part number specific, right? A tool for part number 1 is going to look different than a tool for part number 2.
Yep.
And what happens is historically, the government doesn't buy 10,000 parts and put a tank together, right? They buy a tank from the OEM, and then it goes out into service and it gets blown up or it gets shot at, and they need a replacement part. For example, maybe they need a new muzzle brake for an Abrams tank. Well, the DoD doesn't have any visibility on which foundry created that tooling and poured that component. All they did was buy the tank from the OEM. So when they need that spare and replacement part, they spray and pray, as I like to say. They put out a solicitation and they just pray really hard that somebody with tooling finds that opportunity and is interested in bidding on it. That doesn't always happen. So part of ICON's success is we've actually cataloged defense and military related tooling that resides in both the foundry and the machining industry. And now we're able to connect orders for products needed by the government back to people who have existing tooling. The advantages there, we take 12 to 16 weeks of lead time for tooling creation and first article approval out of the process. And by the way, these replacement orders, they're not 10,000 piece orders. Typically, they're going to be 1, 10s, 50s, hundreds kinds of things.
Sure.
When you start talking about building a new tool that might run you 10, 20, 30, $50,000, and you amortize those costs over 100 pieces, I'm $500 in tooling costs before I even have a nickel into material costs.
Yeah.
By identifying that existing tooling and driving orders to the people that are already tooled, we've shortened lead times and we've taken a heck of a lot of cost out of duplicating tooling. And so we actually save more money for the Defense Department than it costs to set up and operate this program. This is a net win for America. It's a net win for foundries and for machine shops, and it's a net win for the American taxpayer. And we're very proud of that.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. And I mean this month is all about mission-driven organizations, and you guys are obviously on a mission here. So I'm glad to have you on. What's next for NFFS, right? What do you guys have in the future planned, and how can people get involved or support the society if they're not already involved?
Great, Matt.
I lost Jerrod.
There we are.
He said, "Great. How about Matt?"
I'm not trying to hog the conversation here, Matt. Trying to work you in.
Yeah, no worries. James, great question. We see it's all about growing the benefits, bringing more to the table, connecting our members as best as possible, bringing vetted, qualified suppliers into the group that could help grow and enhance the foundries that we have. And then to Jerrod's point from a few minutes ago, ICON is a huge part of what we're doing these days. We want to grow and expand ICON in the foundry program with machine shops, and then also into those other industries so that it could become even a greater tool for American manufacturing. So that's kind of, what's close on the horizon. I've only been here for 2 months. Jerrod and I have talked about a lot of things that we think will be great enhancements that we're kind of doing behind the scenes now that we want to roll out, hopefully in the relative near term, for current members, and hopefully to bring on new members and get that value as well. But James, it's the things we've seen in other manufacturing trade associations we've done. It's finding ways for people to connect, right?
Yeah. To
learn from each other, whether if that's in person, online, share best practices, share what works for them. That's what works for NFFS. That's what we want to grow on and build moving forward.
And is there an opportunity to cross verticals, right? Are there best practices, I guess, that NFFS members have that can impact and help machine shops, can help automation companies, can help welding companies, right? And vice versa, where NFFS members can learn from other verticals within manufacturing as well. Is there that capability of cross-pollination and cross information sharing?
Yeah, and just to go back to ICON again, James, to utilize some of the benefits there. We want to build partnerships. We want it's an ecosystem for machine shops and foundries to work together. You can use the supplier database to connect with potential partners. As Jerrod said earlier, when the foundry is making the castings, there's machining to do. There's a great integration of American manufacturing, right? You're building something from the start. You're pouring the hot metal, you're making the mold, you're getting the casting out. The machine shop's helping finalize that product that's going out the door to help the American military, right? Those two sides of it, the foundry side and the machine shop side, can work hand in hand to do that. And it's, I think it's a win for all manufacturing, for, the different sides of the coin that we, both experience now on the foundry side and the machining side. And they can learn from each other. What works in your machine shop? What safety protocols do you have in place? Same on the foundry side, right? These kind of things, work in those relatively close environments, and there's things you can learn from each other.
Yeah.
Awesome. And to follow up on that, Jim, a lot of foundries have some type of basic machining capability, all the way from a full CNC automated machine shop
I would
to
imagine.
just a Bridgeport and a lathe in the back where they'll do some rough machining.
Sure.
So, as an association, we mentioned our safety protocols. We have comprehensive lockout, tagout programs, machine guarding programs, and those fundamentals are applicable across all industries. So, there's a lot of cross pollination. It's just taking those tools and applying it back to your specific scenario.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a couple of other things that we're working on. We're not unique. We mentioned the labor shortage and the labor challenges that we have in our industry. Um, we're seeing other problems in our industry, right? Right now, property and casualty insurance, for example, is incredibly expensive, incredibly hard to source for foundries. There's some reasons behind that. So, as an association, we're actively working and investigating establishing our industry's own captive insurance program to handle property and casualty. We went through this
Wow.
process back in 2008, 2009 when health insurance premiums were spiking 300% a year. And that's just the power of the association, right? There's strength in
Yeah.
numbers, and we're able to mitigate the risk of any one particular company by conjoining with lots of companies, raising the common denominator, the safety floor for all members within that working group to the betterment of everybody.
Sure.
You know, so we're working at that, and then we're looking at things that are really kind of neat on the workforce development side. And I'll just share a quick story with you. I got a member in Indiana, and he's decidedly had labor issues, right? So how can we communicate to the younger people in my immediate area that are going to potentially be eligible to be my workforce? This guy set up a foundry summer camp. It's kind of a unique idea. He's bringing in kids between 7 and 15 years old to summer camp and teaching them foundry with hands-on activities. They're making stuff. And so I think that that's the kind of thing we need to pursue as a manufacturing industry more broadly, to talk to kids and bring back the maker mentality to them at a very young age. So I think that's a great program. It's had some success. This is the second year they're going to be running that program. If anybody wants more information on that particular summer camp strategy or any information on it, get a hold of us here and we'll be happy to share that with you.
Can I ship my 9-year-old there for the summer? Is it like a stayover camp, or is it something that is it a day camp?
We'll get you some information on that, Jim. I advise against shipping your kid in anything other than an automobile, though.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think I heard my wife yelling at me after that comment. Guys, as we wrap up here, I always ask my guests, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience, right? We've covered an amazing amount of information in the last 50 minutes. Jerrod, I'm going to turn to you first. What haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience?
You know, I think you've been pretty thorough, Jim, but I'd just like to add something just about the culture of these small and mid-sized manufacturers. I had mentioned before that many of them cross-compete for the same customers and the same book of business.
Yeah.
But I've truly never seen a community that's so invested in one another's success, right?
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. I had a member in the state of Illinois a couple of years ago, and he had a conveyor line within his manufacturing plant. The motor driving that line burnt up, and it froze his production line. His production was decidedly down. The manufacturer was telling him it was going to be 2.5 to 3 days before they could get a motor to him. Well,
Wow.
the man's got production schedule and due dates and obligations. He went out to our broader NFFS membership and said, guys, I'm in a tough spot. Does anybody have a motor? Turns out one of our member foundries about an hour away from him had a motor in stock. They drove it over to the man's place, helped him install it on his machine, got his production back up and running within about a 3-hour window. And then, you know, when the replacement motor came in, he just shipped it back to the foundry. And even though they were direct competitors, he cared more about helping his colleague, his brother in arms, to meet his demands and satisfy his customers than to take it as a strategic advantage. And I think that that's a pretty special thing, but I wouldn't say it's rare in our industry. We're competitors, we're all brothers in arms. And I think that's just a really cool culture topic. So when you talk about why work in manufacturing, I think that's an example of what draws me and what I find attractive in it.
Yeah, I'd agree, and that's one of the things that I've loved about this industry for the nearly 20 years now that I've been in it. Right, is the machine shops, the assembly shops that we go in. Sure, they're competing, and yes, they absolutely want a leg up on their competition. But when it comes time for NTMA events or PMA events or NIFS events or whatever the case may be, they all come together. They're sharing ideas. They're sharing those best practices. When I worked with Matt at the NTMA, my favorite part of any of those conferences were the roundtables. It wasn't necessarily the speakers, the keynotes that were getting up in front of the groups. It was listening to the members themselves sharing best practices, sharing ideas, asking questions. That was hands down the most impactful for me, and going back to data and surveys, that was the most impactful for the majority of the people who were in attendance.
Right.
Matt, to you, what didn't I ask you that you want to share?
As expected, James, you've been incredibly thorough. So I think we covered most of it. This has been great. We really appreciate you giving us the time here to kind of peek behind the curtain on the foundry world. We know hopefully it's a kind of a new experience for some of your listeners. We'd love them to come visit us, come visit some of our members, see what it's like in real life. Feel the heat a little bit, to go back to your opening.
Yes.
This has been a really good experience. We're here to support the American non-ferrous foundry industry. We'd love for anyone listening to take a look at take a look at NFFS, take a look at Icon. Not locked into membership. To take a look at Icon, to help support that program, support the American military, and anything your listeners have, any questions of us, we're easy to get a hold of at nifs.org.
Awesome. And I will put NIF's link in the show notes. I'll put the Icon link in the show notes specifically. I'll link to both of their LinkedIn profiles as well. That way you guys can connect directly with Matt and Jerrod through LinkedIn. And you're welcome, both of you. And thank you both for being on. This was awesome, and definitely something that I don't know enough about. I don't know how much the listeners know about. So it was something new, and I loved having you guys on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Jim, for the opportunity, and thank you for doing your podcast. I think you're doing great work in helping to communicate the value of manufacturing to a big audience. So thank you for your efforts as well.
Thank you, Jerrod. I appreciate that. And folks, that wraps up another incredible episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. A huge thank you to our guests, Jerrod Weaver and Matt Gilmore, for sharing their insights and experiences in the fascinating world of non-ferrous foundries. Their passion and dedication to the industry and the mission-driven work of the Non-Ferrous Foundry Society, or NFFS, are truly inspiring. If you're as fired up about manufacturing as I am, be sure to visit our website at manufacturingculturepodcast.com for more episodes and content that celebrates the people and the stories behind the products that I use every day. You can also connect with us on social media. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok to keep the conversation going and stay updated on all things manufacturing and culture related. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could share it with all of your friends, colleagues, your grandma, anyone else who might appreciate the incredible world of manufacturing. Your support helps us reach more listeners and continue to highlight the amazing work being done in this industry. And finally, if you have a moment, please rate and review the show on your favorite platform. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but helps others discover the podcast, because every time that you like, you rate, you review a podcast on whatever platform you're listening to this on, it rockets that podcast up the charts. So if you want us to be able to reach more people, please rate and review. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, keep forging ahead and celebrating the culture of manufacturing. Have a great day and keep making things.